Tonight's second place finisher. Plenty of fans here, Brett, and a solid second place finish.
Yeah, I got to shout out the Turn 2 Terribles over there. They're all a bunch of good guys to hang out with, talk to. I really like them.
What's going on? Turn Two Terribles here. I'm Jimmy, here with Jay-Z and Chris. We're here with a special guest tonight, Justin Snyder. Justin, thank you for joining us.
Yeah, no problem, guys.
So, Justin is joining us from a bowling alley. So, if you hear something in the background, that woman is having the best time of her life, and we're here for it. So, I want to get started a little bit, Justin. We're going to start current, and we're going to go backwards a little bit. So, start with our listeners have seen drivers so far for the most part. When we've done this interview series, they've seen drivers. They probably have heard the name. We start from the beginning, say, how'd you get here? So, I want to start with you and be like, what's your current role? What are you involved in? And then we're going to go backwards and kind of like how you got here. So tell us a little bit about what you're up to, what your roles are, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, sure. So I'm part of the promotional team up at Port Royal Speedway. For the most part, I guess I'm kind of the social media, the press release, the media, whatever you want to call it. I'm the PR representative for the racetrack. So. Alongside of that, though, for all intents and purposes, I'm kind of Steve O'Neill's, one of two, like, right-hand man. So we, I'm very involved in scheduling and, whether it be sponsorship or putting events together or anything, to be honest with you. But for all intents and purposes, I'm one of the, I guess you kind of maybe say like the big three up at Port Royal Speedway. So we're working hard to put the schedule together week to week, and we're getting pretty close here to ready to release stuff here for 2023.
So you're also involved in some other media as well outside of that. Beer Hill Gang TV. Where does that stand right now? What do you guys do in the off season, and what's your role during the season with that?
Yeah, it's honestly taken a bit of a back seat. So my background, I was a journalist in the military. I was public affairs in the Army for 12 years, and I've grown up at the racetracks my entire life. My dad and I, as a kid, I spent a lot of time at Silver Spring Speedway, and I ended up getting in the military. I went in there as a journalist. I traveled. I deployed. I went all over the country and did a lot of writing and a lot of public affairs work. And when I found out, I kind of was getting to the point where I was about to get out. I was kind of looking for a way to keep going with that stuff, but outside the military. And as a kid growing up in Central PA, it was a very easy choice to kind of pivot towards the racing world. A couple of us got together. We created Beer Hill Gang TV, and that's a whole story in itself. It was a wild ride, to be honest with you, but it led to Port Royal Speedway. And quite frankly, as my duties and our duties have grown over the last 3-4 years, unfortunately, it's taken a bit of a back seat just because, we've all got full-time jobs. And as many of us know, the promotion business and racing world is, whether it's part-time or not, it's a full-time gig itself. So we've kind of had to make some sacrifices where we could, but for the most part, Beer Hill Gang TV still exists. It's hasn't gone anywhere. But for the most part now, it's more of a live deal than anything. We've got a very good relationship with Williams Grove Speedway, so we still host live shows, pre-race shows for all of their World of Outlaw shows. Any of their tribute shows, we host all the pre-race shows for that as well. So it's kind of pivoted from a little bit of what you guys are doing to more of I don't want to call it a hobby necessarily, but it's just turned into a kind of a live show deal. And I mean, hell, as of even yesterday, we were literally talking about spitting one out here this week. So it's still active, it's still going, and we still have a passion for that side of things. But as we've grown at Port Royal, it's just kind of had to take a back seat because something's got to give here and there, and unfortunately, that's kind of the thing it has.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I think that, Jimmy, Chris, and I are, while we're new to this and kind of new together with it, we're realizing quickly, like, man, there's an appetite for content in Central PA. But there's also a lot of content out there. So there's like a mix of it. And it's kind of like it goes in waves of I know Beer Hill Gang TV, and honestly, it's the off season, so I expect it to be quiet. But I remember, the last 1 to 3 years, every night it seemed like I could watch videos from the night before. If I was at the track or not, I could see the interview with the drivers. I love that stuff. So, but that takes people and time and commitment, and like there's people going in that direction. So,
yeah, that whole deal started as we had some guys out at Knoxville, and we just we were sitting at home, and we were like, I bet you the people at home want to know what the hell Greg Hodnett's doing in Knoxville. They want to know, like, what are those dudes doing? And we had Earl out there, and we kind of spit some ideas around and went into Radio Shack and bought a mic and threw up a Facebook post overnight. And I mean, when I say it happened overnight, it literally did. We never, ever expected it to turn into, quite frankly, anything. It was just something we were going to try and do. And, Greg ended up winning the preliminary show out there that night. And, we ended up with one of the first interviews with him, and it grew from there. And it just, I tell you, it was quite the ride. And we did, as you guys mentioned, we realized there was an appetite for it in Central PA, and we ran with it. And next thing you know, we're part of the promotional staff at Port Royal, and we've got thousands of dollars worth of sponsorship behind us. And, we're doing stuff that we never thought we were ever going to do. And like you said, it kind of turns into a job. And when, I don't hate it at all, because it obviously got me and some of the other guys where we got today. But again, it just, sometimes you gotta kind of cut back where you can to make sure the things that are priorities make sense. And we fully intend to roll it out when we can here in the 2023 season. But it's just one of those things where, and quite frankly, when you work at a racetrack on a regular basis, sometimes I'll be honest with you, I don't get a lot of opportunities to be a fan as much as I used to. And, if I'm at the racetrack, it's probably because I got something going on, and I got to be there for a reason. And sometimes it's just like, I want to go to Williams Grove and just enjoy the National Open, and I don't want to do anything else. I want to go have a couple beers with my buddies and enjoy an off night. So it's grown, and we still fully intend to keep that going. But it's just we're in a different place than we were 3 or 4 years ago.
It's funny you mentioned that. We were just talking before this about enjoying the night, and I said I didn't go to the racetrack last year and not buy a pit pass. For the first time in my life, I bought a pit pass every single event I attended last year. And last year was the first year I've ever done photography in my life. And I was like, well, if I'm going to, I want to have access to the pits and go here. And back in the day, it used to be, if it was an outlaw show or I was a big fan of somebody, I'd buy a pit pass, but I never wanted to be in that chaos, right? Like, but last year it was like everything changed a little bit. And it's like, I want to be a fan. There was nights where I'm debating, like, nah, I don't need a beer. I'm walking over here. I'm going across the track. Like, I'm going into pits. I'll be back later. And they never saw me again. So I can understand that balance totally. So even if you want to sneak away and go to, Path Valley one night, you still feel like, well, I have off. I don't want to go to the racetrack.
Right. And there was other nights. There was other nights where there was like one of them, Jeremy, where all year where you're like, you know what? Put the camera down. We're here to hang out. It was one time all year, and that was it. One single at a time, and that's gotta be tough.
That feature was the Logan Wagner, Anthony Macri feature when they were sliding each other for the lead. That was the feature. Right. I decided to stay in the infield. I took I got victory lane shot that I wanted.
It was a good night to do it.
It was a good night to do it, right? So I picked the right one for sure. And I especially at Port Royal, honestly, like I love taking photos up there, but I want to be a fan as much as I want to take photos because I miss so much of the action trying to get a shot through the corner I'm standing at or whatever that I miss the comers and goers and what's happening lap traffic. I miss a lot of that stuff because I'm just so focused on that. And man, when I go up there, I really just want to watch what the hell's happening. So,
and I will say on top of that though, and this is maybe I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself, but one of the things I would encourage any track or any person involved in the sport is never lose that aspect, because in terms of our promotional team, heck, I'm gearing up here to go to Florida and in a few weeks. I'm going to go out there and do some conference stuff with the RPM workshops and work with other promoters and learn. But the bottom line is there ain't a single one of us who got here because we weren't a fan of the sport. And, more than just enjoying it, especially in my role and in our roles, I'm watching everything that's happening, whether it's fan experiences or how fast they're getting cars out on the track, and, the checks they use, the fireworks that are going up. We're taking in every single thing from every local track. I don't care if it's the smallest track in the country. You got to be looking at these things and saying, how can I make my product better? And we don't get that way unless we're fans. So, you can find 95% of, we get a lot of slack on social media a lot of times when maybe we have a night off or whatever. And then it's like, those guys only have off because they want to go to the races. And to a certain degree, that's kind of true, to be honest with you, because it's not the sole reason behind it. But at the end of the day, we're trying to get better because we want to see the biggest event in Central PA that weekend. How are they doing it? And I think that's just as important as anything we can do. Race night is frankly learning from what's going on around us.
How long have you been with Port Royal as far as an official capacity?
I think this is year 4, maybe 5. I honestly, it's kind of hard for me to think back because it's been such a whirlwind, but it's definitely at least year 4.
No, and the reason I was going to say that is I look at Port Royal as a fan. When I was younger, I was Lincoln, Babs. I'm in Southern York area, so like Port Royal to me was like, hey, I got a plan to go up there. Right now, that hour and a half drive is like, man, I can't wait. So the improvements and the turnaround that track made over the last decade, let's say. Like, I don't think there's any secret with your involvement and some of the other obviously important people's involvement and everything that's happened. Like, were you a Port Royal fan, visitor, regular before the improvements, and then you got to see this transition, or how did that work out for you?
Like I said, my real background racing wise was Silver Spring Speedway. I grew up. I love that place, and that's where I've learned everything I know about racing. And families. And Earl, the announcer, it's ironic because it wasn't intentional, and we weren't necessarily friends throughout the years, but him and I sat one row apart from each other as kids at Silver Springs in turn 4 every single week. And ironically enough, 15, 20 years later, we end up linking up and we're where we are now. But, as a kid, I can tell you my first experiences with Royal Speedway were, I had a neighbor kid whose mom and dad, and they went to Williams Grove a lot. They went to 410 races, and we did Silver Springs. And we kind of had a bit of I would say like a trade-off of sorts where, we'd take him on Saturday nights and his dad would take me on Friday nights. And we weren't poor by any means, but to get to go to a 410 show anywhere was kind of a big deal because we kind of had to decide, are you going to do one night or 2 nights? And
right.
a lot of times when I was a kid, it was the only times we went to 410 shows ever was the Icebreaker, World of Outlaw shows. And even then it was like, my dad would stand in line at the bleachers and I'd run the chairs in and set them along the fence and go running around and get my postcards and my autographs from the guys as they were unloading the trailers. And then I'd come back out just in time. We'd run home, we'd eat dinner, and we'd come back 3 hours later and go to the races. It was, my life was very much associated with Silver Springs, and that was my highlight of the weekend. I can tell you the first time I ever went to Port Royal was that same friend took me to the one of Tuscarora 50 nights. I didn't even know what that place was. And frankly, I remember sitting in the infield, and it's kind of weird because I think Todd Schaefer may have won the night. I don't remember, to be honest with you, but I can remember Joey Allen running around in a shark car and just thinking this place is freaking so cool, and being in the infield. And we went as a family a couple nights there, and I remember sitting in the old covered grandstands, and it was so freaking loud. I can't. For people who don't know, growing up in that world, like we went to the races every week, but I can tell you, my mom hated it, and she was like, "We're going to the infield. Like this is something else." And it was like, it's the old saying is like fighter jets in an auditorium or whatever you want to call. I mean, it was just like that, and it was scary as hell, to be quite honest with you, because you're right on top of the racetrack. And I tell you, probably the last time I went there, before I got involved with my role as an adult, we went up there early in the year with my dad and me and a couple guys. Remember, it was so freaking cold, and it was one of the early races in the year, and we were sitting up in probably around turn 4-ish, and I can remember rocks coming flying up and hitting us in the face, and I can remember, I think it rained that night and it got canceled out, and I literally remember leaving that place and just going like, I don't want nothing to do with this place. Like, why did we come up here? Like, this is dumb. And to be on the other end of the coin and be a part of, I say it all the time, and it's true, me and the other guys were extremely blessed to come on when we came on, because it was already on the upswing. It was already moving forward, and quite frankly, our jobs were just not to screw it up. But and thankfully we haven't. I feel like we've played a role in it, and it's definitely grown. I think we've had a part in that. But there was already great people doing great things at that place, and it's not anywhere near the place that I quite frankly said I don't want nothing to do with this place. I'm so proud to be a part of that racetrack and to just have a little role, if any, in making and seeing what it's become.
It is pretty wild, the transformation. I went there one time for a Tuscarora 50. And it was like a day show, I want to say, and I think Fred Raymer won it. And I couldn't see any of the cars, and it was literally just a Dust Bowl daytime, slick, slow around the bottom. Like, I was like, whatever. Like, Lincoln was action track, right? Like, this was like, I don't know why is this the thing? So that was a long time ago, and then since I've come back, it's been that way. So. Jimmy, what do you got for Justin for us?
I was just wondering, so you guys have been making a lot of, like you're talking about every year, almost a lot of improvements at that track. Is there anything that you guys did this off season that might be exciting for fans to see next year?
The crazy thing is the
I just wanted to put my hands up. I'm sorry.
The normal answer is quite honestly no. But outside of that, I'd tell you the real answer is yes. There's a lot happening. It's just not the same things that maybe a lot of fans are going to be used to. They've seen the suites and the bleachers and the catch fences and all these things, and quite frankly, when you set an expectation like that and you build as fast as we have and you succeed like you do, I think every year everyone's going like, what the heck are they going to do next? And quite frankly, now it's to the point where we've got a pretty solid base, and really now it's like, okay, how can we fine tune the little things? Maybe it's bring in an extra sponsor that we can hold a $5,000 to $10,000 race when we couldn't before. It's how can we improve the racing surface by an extra 5-10 laps a night? It's little things like that quite frankly the average fan probably is not going to see. But I'll tell you, it's we're working just as hard as we ever have, and it's and that's why I mentioned it. I'm going down to Florida in a couple of weeks. We're going to meet with a bunch of promoters and talk and chat, and we're working as hard as we ever have. But unfortunately, I guess you'd say we kind of hit some high peaks in the last 4 or 5 years, where it's like, if we're not building a jumbotron or putting a spaceship in the infield or something like that, it's like, what the hell are these dudes doing? So,
I was going to say that you guys built that cathedral of a tunnel to the infield. That thing is so amazing, and it's so hard to top. And that's actually where our name come from. comes from Turn
Right.
2 Terribles is we sit turn 2 right on the fence at Port Royal all the time, and that's just kind of where the name came up from. So that, very much appreciative of Port Royal and what you guys have done there
Right.
the past couple of years and
Right.
everything.
Like
Go
for
ahead.
me, I remember going through that little round dungeon that you bang your head off on going down to the infield.
Yeah, and if it
That was
rained,
my
you were like walking knee
Yep.
deep.
Oh hell. So that was my experiences. Now you have like this thing. It's like, holy hell, this is a cathedral of stairs and happiness. I remember like the Hot Net Classic, I guess 2021. That was the night we got trapped in the infield, and
Yeah.
I got down to the tunnel. I'm like,
Yeah, it's
wow,
not gonna
this is
rain.
great. It's not gonna rain. So we got down to that. Did in between all the stairs. I'm like, this is great. We're not even getting wet. This is glorious.
It's like a whole other world down there.
Yeah,
But
sure.
to your point, though, you said but the peaks and stuff, and we talked about all the improvements, the suites and the tunnel and everything. The track's been great. The Tuscarora 50 though is slowly, I guess rather quickly, climbing to like national prominence, right? Like over the last 2 to 5 years, it's really like we've known it locally as probably the second one. Now it's like a national recognized race. Like, what's that like navigating all that?
I tell you what, I've had a lot of really cool moments in our role, and when you do this stuff every week, I don't think sometimes you don't realize the impact you're making, I guess. But I tell you, I think it was like 2 years ago we had, obviously the 50's been growing and growing and growing, and for me it was, so it's kind of weird, but our regular race day, I tell you honestly, I never know what the hell I'm going to be doing on a race day because I have things I'm supposed to be doing, but shit breaks loose at any minute. And that night, I started my day out in the parking lot, literally hawking wristbands with a little box full of cash and a bunch of wristbands and some forms you got to fill out, and I'm just walking down the line down the street there the whole way outside the barriers, and we're going down the street hawking tickets. If you've got exact cash, fill this out, I can get you out of line. And at one point, sometimes you got to just take it in and you got to look around, and that place I would say it was the COVID year, but we joked about it a lot. And, obviously what we were going through as a country and as a state, there was a lot happening that year. But I remember standing in the infield with Steve O'Neill, and we were talking about like, we're going to do this again next year. And we're chatting, blah, blah, blah. And I said, I told him, I said, when you get the mic, I said, tell all the people we can't wait to do it next year when we can do it at full capacity, because it was just like an instant joke because we were only supposed to have 25% people there or whatever the hell it was.
Nope.
Yeah.
But,
I was there that year.
Yeah,
I
I looked around and just went like, "Are you serious? Like, look at this place! Like, this
that
is
was insane."
outrageous." And
It was surreal.
with the social media stuff that we do, taking video footage and getting a bunch of, just seeing all the cell phones light up on the parade laps, and it was just a wild world we were living in, and quite frankly, I guess it maybe made me appreciate it a little bit more, because it was like, Jesus, we're not just little Port Royal anymore. This is a big freaking deal, and I think every year, we've lived with that, and we've tried to embrace that and say, like, this is not just about 35 cars anymore racing for a couple grand. This is a deal where the whole world's watching, and we don't want to screw it up. So it's wild. It's something I don't think any of us saw coming. I don't care what anybody says. We've all had visions and we all have these grand ideas, but we didn't see it coming. But again, it's a lot of the hard work. It's people putting into time and doing it. And I'll tell you this: we don't plan on stopping anytime soon. So it's not we're not peaking yet. We're gonna keep going. So
Great. That's where I think it's interesting. Like you said, no one saw it coming because, like, locally we all knew National Open, Williams Grove National Open up here, and Tuscarora 50 and the Dream Race, they were there. But now the Tuscarora 50 is kind of closing in. You have just as many cars or close to it, especially coming off Fair Week and stuff. Like you had the iconic Ferris wheel and stuff off turn one. Like it's been really cool to see, like you said, over the last 3 years, how that race has closed the gap, at least nationally. I think, in my opinion, where guys want to come to Port Royal because the track is so racy and so fun. But
And you know
it's an
what?
atmosphere.
I'll tell you from a promoter standpoint, quite frankly, I would be I have to think that we're the best, in my opinion. Like we have to. Like that's the idea we look at when we come into it every time. Is like, no, we're the top, and we're gonna be the top, and we're gonna make it bigger. We're gonna make it better. As a fan, I talk about this all the time outside of my stuff I do, but I say like, to me, is in my entire life, especially as a kid growing up, getting to go to Silver Springs and not getting a lot of 410 racing. It was a huge deal for me to get to go to Williams Grove, to go to a War of Outlaws show. And my fandom and some of the greatest moments of my life revolve around the Williams Grove National Open, and I just that race and that place is always, and I live 10 minutes from Williams Grove Speedway. Like that race and that whole deal is always going to hold a huge part of my heart, and I wouldn't be where I'm at without those moments and without that track and without that race. And frankly, like I still look at it as the Mecca. I do. Like to me, that's the biggest and best. I mean, yeah, they're saying I don't really, a lot of people will knock on it every week and they'll talk about the racing and I don't care. And there's nothing better in the world than PA Posse versus the World of Outlaws on a Friday, Saturday night for 75 grand with the whole world watching. Like, if you ain't lived it and you ain't grown up with it, like you don't understand it. But with that being said, I know me and our guys, we're working just as hard because, in 10, 15 years, maybe 20, whatever it is, maybe it's 5, I want to be able to look back and go like our Tuscarora 50 was that for some kid. And I think we're well on our way to being that. We obviously we already there. We're there, and but again, it doesn't come without hard work and all the tracks before us and all the races before us and the atmosphere and the fans. That's what's getting us there, and none of us have forgotten that. So,
and I can tell you, at least for one kid, my kid, that your race is right there. That Ferris wheel over top. We've done it 2 years in a row now. That the Tuscarora 50 is that race for her. So. Definitely awesome what you all are doing up there.
So I agree. Like I'm not a kid, but it's still badass. I got a late model picture with the freaking, Ferris wheel in the background. Like I'm a kid and I'm like, this is just cool. So you talked about Williams Grove a little bit, and I want to touch on something just briefly. And you had some comments about the Williams Grove Bridge this in the fall here. And, they kind of stood out to me. And I guess I'm not a Williams Grove historian. I don't maybe have the sentimental value tied to that bridge like a lot of people or some people do. And I know its importance. I know its significance, but I don't have this emotional whatever to it. Your comments were sort of about safety and sort of like, hey, it's 2022. Where do you stand with that? What's your kind of thoughts and background on that?
I'll be honest with you. The kid that grew up trying to wait in line to run across that bridge and get from side to side, it's still there. It's never left.
Right.
I'll be honest, as an adult, it's a little bit more of a pain in the ass.
Right.
But thankfully, I got the old pit van now, and I can walk across the track when I want to. But I don't know. It's a tough deal because especially in the promoter standpoint where I'm at now, it's like, yes, you do got to be thinking safety and everything you do. And sometimes you got to put your, the heart that's on your sleeve and kind of just put it to the side and go like, the politically correct or the let's move the sport forward aspect of it has to, something's got to give. And honestly, I do. I hate it. It drives me nuts because, I'm 30. I'll be 35 in March, and I can tell you, there's less than a couple fingers on my hand that I can tell you when I've seen anyone hit that bridge. So the realist in me says like it's not a big deal. This is tradition. This is what we're known for. The whole world's coming to this place because of this stupid bridge, and maybe it's stupid, but the reality is it's a big deal.
That's real.
It's a big part of it. And, I do often get concerned with, what happens when we lose some of these little touches. For instance, I tell you, Port Royal Speedway, I love the place. I love where we've come, but I'll be honest with you. When I heard we were going to when I was in the talks and we were chatting about, listen, we're going to widen the front stretch and we're going to lose the old shit house for Victory Lane.
The shit house, yeah.
You know,
It hurts. It hurts your heart.
We talked about like we're going to park it on the shit house. Like that was a big deal. And when you lose a little bit of the history and a little bit of that aspect, I mean that stings. And I think what people don't realize sometimes is, you know, this sport, just like any sport. I mean, I'm a huge baseball fan, and I love the Atlanta Braves. It's my favorite thing in the world. And my life revolves around Fulton County Stadium and those base paths and just like now, you know, and I tell those people as promoters every week, I say, you're not just talking about racing, you're talking about people's memories, you're talking about people's moments, and you can evolve as much as you want, but you're never gonna replace people's moments and people's feelings, and they're built around that bridge, and they're built around. I mean, I can tell you quite honestly, like there's a lot of things I've seen as a race fan in my lifetime. I've seen some great races. I've seen great moments, and I've seen people in Victory Lane. I've had experiences that I've never imagined I would have. But, you know, I can tell you, I said this a couple months back. There was a podcast with Chris Aish on it, and, you know, I told him, I said, you don't even know it. I said, it was probably one of the worst, dumbest moments of your lifetime. I said, but I can remember as a kid being at Williams Grove Speedway, standing on Beer Hill, walking down towards the backstretch. I mean, the front stretch. Oh no, the backstretch. Going towards the bridge, and Sammy Swindell and the Channel Lock car and Chris Aish banged wheels, coming under that bridge, and Chris Aish ended up he kept going. I know he wrecked. Sammy kept going. He had mud packed in the wheel. And I think Steve Kinzer ended up winning that race, or maybe Mark Kinzer. I don't remember exactly, but I tell you what, like that bridge, the imagery of it, those two guys, Posse versus Outlaws, battling under that place, that was, I can tell you with 100% fact, like that's the moment I became a fan of the sport. I loved it my entire life, but that right there, I was like, this is the coolest freaking thing I've ever seen in my life. You've got two opposite ends of the spectrum. You've got this cool bridge. You've got it, and I'll never lose that. And, you know, it would be a shame for us to lose a little bit of that history, because I think the kids today need that. And, you know, that's part of, as a young promoter in this sport, I think it's something I try and keep going is, you know, how can I connect those dots from my childhood to this kid's childhood? Obviously, you know, you can't keep everything, but I don't know. I would personally, if it was me, I think you got to take it down at some point, just because where we are as a world and where we are as a sport, and safety obviously matters. But I think you got to figure out something to integrate it with the future, because connecting the dots from the past to the future is just as important now as it ever was. So.
I think you guys at Port Royal are doing that, because like Chris had said, you know, you guys got the Ferris wheel there in Fairwood.
Right.
That's something that's a memory.
That's what I was going to say. Is
you guys got those you guys got those lights going, you know, at Port Royal.
The only thing other than the Ferris wheel at Port Royal my daughter knows is bridge track, right? Like she knows it's the bridge track. It's our racetrack, and she was super pissed that she wasn't at the National Open for the last bridge track race. So I think, to Jimmy's point, you can continue on that. It's like between Fair Week for Tuscarora 50, the bridge overall for Williams Grove. That's two things that connect the dots to what we knew growing up that made us love the sport, to how to get the kids involved to love the sport. Like, that's the thing.
Yeah, and like I said, I do think, you know, especially for our sport to succeed in the future, you've always got to be moving forward. But you know, it's one of my favorite. I don't want to say it's a quote, because I don't even know who to quote it to, but I always say you can't know where you're going until you know where you've been, and the reality is there's a lot of history involved in that. I mean, it is to a lot of people it's a stupid bridge, but you know, to somebody it's the last race they saw with their grandfather. To somebody it's the place where their dad met their mom. You know, there's so much that goes into this sport that's beyond just the racing on the racetrack. And yes, I'm fully understanding that you've got to move forward for safety's sake and a lot of things. You know, listen, I've seen guys pass away at the racetrack, and it's awful. And you never want to feel that, especially in a promoter standpoint. You don't want to be the one who's responsible for something happening. But I do think it's important And thankfully we do have the Eastern Museum of Motor Racing. I've made a point in the last 5-6 years to do as much as possible with them because I want to preserve the history and I don't want to forget things. And if that's what happens to it, if it ends up down there, I'll be the first one to be standing down there giving tours across that thing, telling people how it used to matter because it's always gonna matter. And as far as I'm
Right.
concerned, it's not gonna. Listen, it might go away, but the bottom line is, it's a big part of our history, and it needs to be part of us going forward. So,
I do agree with everything you've said. Like the safety is priority. Obviously,
Yeah,
we don't
that trumps
want
it all.
just because it hasn't happened yet doesn't mean it won't. And I think where it's at, the odds are low, but we heard different things about moving it down. I think the key is if it goes away, I would rather just, in my opinion, just go away. Go be in a museum. Like go, don't rebuild it. Don't do something else. Just make it be a thing of its own, and that'd be
So
good enough for me.
yeah, and the one thing that stands out to me here, Justin, talking to you is just being we need more ambassadors of the sport that are here for the sport to preserve the sport and find out new ways to create new memories with new things, because it's gonna have to move forward. The shitter, the shit house, the bridge, the old tunnel, new tunnel, whatever that those memories are for Chris's daughter's age or even us growing up. We need more ambassadors of the sport like yourself that frankly give a shit about what we're doing here and not the money, not the notoriety, and not the likes on Facebook and not all this other bullshit, but saving what we have in Central PA and what people before us have built and continuing that on in any way we can do and creating new memories for new fans and bringing people to the track. And what you guys are doing in Port Royal, I can tell you that whatever y'all have done and just before you and what you have done have brought me to Port Royal because
Mhm.
10 years ago, I wouldn't have gone to Port Royal unless you paid me to go because it's an hour and a half away from where I live. It's not convenient for a location. And I didn't have any reason to be like, yeah, that sounds like fun to go sit there and get my rocks blown at me and dust and I can't see the cars or, whatever else it may be. So what you guys have done as Port Royal and have the passion for the sport and also some background in like, hey, I know we can do this and the effort, the passion, and some common sense to say we can make this work. We need to continue to find more people like you guys and your group to do that with all the places because Williams Grove, I think we're all familiar enough and been there enough that there's some struggles happening. We may not, you may be the bridge we're talking about, but if something doesn't change, are we talking about the entire facility? I don't know. I mean, I don't know enough, but like we need to have somebody more people like a Justin Snyder get involved somehow, some way to preserve the sport moving forward for
Right.
all of our kids, ourselves.
And right, because like from the Port Royal side, everything you all doing out there seems to turn to gold. Like for the last 4 years, everything has been glorious for the last
A
4
lot of
years.
hard work to make gold, buddy.
I was
Right.
gonna say it's again, I mentioned on it, and listen, I don't I'm very proud of what we've done up there, and when we win awards, hell, I've got a banquet on Saturday. I've got one next Saturday. Like it doesn't stop, and I'm extremely blessed and proud to be a part of anything we accomplish, and to be able to even put my name remotely in it, it does make you feel good. But I think the bottom line is that it takes a freaking army. It doesn't. We've got people working, and a lot of it's volunteer work. I mean, a couple of years
Yeah.
ago, 2 3 years ago during COVID, I lost my job for a hot second there, and I spent a couple months up at the racetrack cutting logs down from local tree poles that had been taken down by the Juniata County municipal services that we reused for posts in the corners and one in 3 and 4 and putting up guardrails and you've got guys like Keith Kaufman up there who've obviously since stopped driving who are I tell you what guys like that I can't even begin to explain to you how much work those dudes are putting in Monday through Friday when guys like me are working a full-time job
Right.
and doing what I can do and there's so many people that are going into doing these deals and um, yeah, I'm so proud of it. And I tell you what, I obviously with what I do, I get the brunt of a lot of the complaints and a lot of the success as well. When things aren't going well, I hear it. And when things are going well, I hear it as well. And that's great. But it doesn't take it's not just me.
Yeah.
As a kid, I will tell you, again, I grew up in Silver Springs. That's a track. It don't exist anymore. It's not there. It's a parking lot. It's a Wegmans grocery store and a Target. And I tell you, to be honest with you, I live 5 miles from there, and I got a dad who still has never stepped foot in that Target. He'll drive 30 minutes out of town to go to another Target because that's our life. That's what we lost. And it's a wild deal, but I know what it feels to see something you've put so much into just gone, and not necessarily because you wanted it to, just because the world changes, life changes, and unfortunately things happen. So I'm very glad and proud that I'm part of something that maybe was probably closer than most people realize to being that. But it's not there, and it's because of a lot of hard work. And as a 35-year-old kid, I still call myself a kid. I'm an adult. I don't have any hair as a kid in this sport, but it's something that I hope to be a part of for a long time. And I've got a guy like Steve and our restaurant promotional team who's guided us along the way, and quite frankly took a chance on us. There was a lot of people who, when I got the role I got, said that, number one, that kid is not, he's going to fail because he's just a Beer Hill Gang guy that likes to drink beer on the weekends, and it ain't going to happen. And you know what? We had to prove them wrong. And there's some of the people that hired us we had to prove wrong. And here we are 4 or 5 years later. And, I mean, there's stuff happening behind the scenes that I got my hands involved in more things than I ever wanted to be honest with you. But it's a blessing. And, when I get to go here in a couple of weeks down to Florida and be part of the promotional workshops down there with some of the best, Knoxville and Eldora and I-80 and, I-55 and all these tracks. It's like, what the hell am I doing here?
Right. But real moments for sure.
It's you had to work hard to get there, and it hasn't escaped me how lucky I am to be there. So
you had brought up just now Steve O'Neill, National Promoter of the Year, now a couple years running. Obviously, a big reason you guys, why you guys have been on the up and up at Port Royal. Can you just tell me a couple things that you have learned from him, and just the man himself?
I'll tell you what, number one, I mentioned it earlier, but he's a fan. I don't think you will never find an open weekend where Steve's not at a racetrack. And it's not because number one, yeah, he's a fan, but number two, he is trying to learn. Like listen, everybody in this world, I don't care what your occupation is. If you've ever had a great idea, you probably stole it from somebody else. Somebody else did it first. And, but he finds a way to make it our own. And that's so important to me as a fan and as a driver. Number two, he's so, I can't explain it enough, but he took a chance on some kids who weren't supposed to be there. And a lot of people said they wouldn't.
Are you going to be a little bit?
Just a couple minutes. I tell you what, and he'll tell you, he did. He took some flack, but he took a chance because he felt it was the right thing to do. And I like to think that we're still paying dividends to that. And I tell you what, if I joke about it all the time, but I said, I hope one day that I don't care what it's doing, whether it's writing, whether it's social media, whether it's promoting, I don't know where the sport's going to take me, but if I ever get to the Hall of Fame or any of those things, any recognition, there's not a moment in my lifetime where I'm not going to be able to look back and go, I'm here because of a guy like Steve O'Neill. And finally, the biggest thing is, people don't see it, but Steve is, you can find him every week at Port Royal. And before the races come out, before the drivers come out, he stands down there in turn 3 and 4 on that chute coming in the car, and he gives every single one of those drivers a thumbs up. He knows them in and out. He knows their families. He knows their lives. And it's not about making a couple bucks on Saturday. I mean, yes, it is. It is. That's a big part of it.
Right. You have to, though.
But I tell you what, Steve he's built a family for all intents and purposes. He's built He's built a group of people who are passionate, and he's found the right people, and he's put them in positions to succeed. And there isn't a darn person who will tell you anything differently. And every recognition he's earned, it's because he deserved it, and he he puts a lot of trust in us. I mean, I'll tell you what. There's some times when I throw some stuff at him, and I go like, "Listen, I'm thinking about doing this. Like, what do you think?" And more than not, he just goes, "Give it a go, see what happens." And listen, if we fail, I'm gonna fall on that sword every time. But if we succeed, he's also the first guy to go like, "Hey man, you worked really hard, and I'm proud of you, and you believed in it, and you stuck to it, and it worked." So he's one of those guys who, listen, every track could use a guy like that. But it does show the success he's gained, the respect he has from the guys in the pits. I mean, you won't often hear a driver going out cussing out Steve O'Neill in the media.
Mhm.
They know they can call him any hour of the day, and he's probably going to pick up the phone. And if they got a problem, maybe it's not right, maybe they're wrong, but he's going to listen. And if we can, we're going to sit down and talk and say, how can we make this better because so that doesn't happen again. And that's why we're where we are, because a guy that believed in, like Steve's a local. He lives a couple blocks from the racetrack. He's grown up at that place, sitting in those grandstands when that place was nothing more than a dusty patch in the middle of town. And he's seen it, and he's seen the whole ride, and he's fully invested in it. And it's a guy like that I would be. Again, I know that takes a team, but he's just as responsible for, quite frankly, keeping that place alive as anybody. And whatever we do in the future is going to be because of the legacy he created and the people he put in place to take it to the future.
So I know you're getting to get kicked out of there soon, so we'll cut this short here, so that young lady can go home. So one of the things that stands out is I've seen Steve O'Neill do that, and just being involved in the last year or two, coming up there and being, trying to get some photos. And I've seen Steve O'Neill out there, and some of the things that you just talked about are things that I don't see other places. And I'm not going to put a name. I'm not going to talk about any of that as far as like, hey, you're trash because of it. But those little things mean a lot. And if you don't get drivers to show up, you don't have fans to show up. If you don't have fans to show up, you don't have an event. And it's simple as that. And what does it take to get drivers to come up there? And this is why, if I'm a fan first. Why do you think you're seeing guys go, I don't want to race for points. I'm going to go up to Port Royal. I don't need to race for points. I want to go here. I want to go there. And you're seeing more and more people going north on Saturdays. So there's a reason for that. That's not just because they, some might love Port Royal and the dimensions of the track and all that, but there's more to it than that, because more of the years when I hear complaints, it's how the track treated somebody, not necessarily how it raced.
Right.
I mean, I would tell you first off, with that, number one, obviously, this is one thing Steve's taught me more than anything, and I live by this shit when it comes to racing and promoting. But like we don't host races at Royal Speedway. We host events. We host 7 a.m. donuts in the parking lot. We host make the parking situation better. We host let's have a band at 4 p.m. We host let's have a tailgating contest. And and Steve's ingrained that in us from the get-go, and it's something I'll never forget. We're all there to see cars go around the track 30, 50 times, whatever it is, 25 times. The bottom line is it's about the experience. It's about the memories you're making before the race. It's about the memories. It's about how long did it take you to get out of the parking lot when you left. It's about did they run out of hot sausages at 5 o'clock?
Right.
It's about all that stuff. And
what was the race that got rained out a year or two ago? As like before maybe hot laps, it got rained out and we all got sent home. I sat in that goddamn parking lot.
I think the hot net.
I think it was the hot net.
It was definitely the hot net. Then we all died in the infield.
Man,
like a cathedral of a tunnel.
It was before I got into photography. It was before I was into pits a lot. I sat in that day. I should have took a nap and just stayed there for a couple hours. It was the worst case scenario you could have ever had happen, honestly, because it was 54 million people there. It was like Super Bowl attendance. It was the worst possible
scenario. And that's the worst case scenario.
It was, dude. Like
the bottom line is he taught us that, and I tell you what, I've never forgot it. And anybody who's ever asked me, it's the same damn thing. I'll tell you every time. Like, I don't even. You could have the worst race. You could have 25 laps of snoozer, but I tell you what, if some kid met his favorite driver in the in the pits beforehand or after he got an autograph, if I don't know if he got a frisbee when you threw it to him, there's so much that goes into that night, and it's about when the gate. It's before the gates open. It's after the gates are closed. It don't stop, and he's got people believing in that, and I'm one of them, and then we make it happen because of stuff like that. And the drivers obviously listen. They're gonna come. Anytime you. I mean, hell, I know what our schedule looks like for this year. It's coming very soon. For the record, I give it a week or so. But and there's
any surprises.
I was hoping to have some news for you guys tonight, but unfortunately can't give it to you. But there's some cool stuff happening, and frankly, the bottom line is, we are very lucky that we may host 40 races a year, and I'd tell you probably 25 of them are big events when it comes to other tracks in the area, and we're blessed by that. And
That's awesome.
That's what keeps the drivers coming. Quite frankly, it's the money on the table.
Sure,
you're good. You're good. I'm coming.
We gotta wrap it up here.
All right, we'll get you out of here, buddy. We'll let her go home.
We are blessed. We're very lucky, and it's because of the hard work we put in, and they'll keep coming. And we hope they do. And if they don't, we're gonna find a reason to get them to come back. So, we're gonna keep working at it. And listen, I'd love to. Unfortunately, I'm in a bad spot.
You get out of here.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you for all the time.
Thank you, man.
Yeah, but realistically,
we're gonna have you back too.
If you guys need more at any time, I'm always available. Obviously, quite frankly, I mean, where I'm at now is because of something like you guys are doing now, and I always appreciate anybody who's willing to spread the sport in a positive light. There's so many negatives that happen nowadays that it's so easy to get caught up, especially in the social media world. I mean, I make a living doing this stuff outside of racing too, but it's easy to get wrapped up in it. And I'm glad to see, some folks like you listen, as Beer Hall Gang TV has slowed down and we haven't been able to keep up with it as much as possible. I'm so glad to see people like you guys doing your part, because it takes a freaking mountain, to get where we're at. So, you guys are obviously welcome up at the track anytime you want to. If you guys ever need help, please reach out.
That, man.
I'm when I'm not getting kicked out of a bowling alley at 11 o'clock tonight.
Tell the viewers you bowled a 300 tonight. You're fine.
I have 5 of them in my life.
No shit.
Wow. We would hear about that. Before you get.
That's a whole other podcast, right?
Yeah.
We're here for it.
Hey,
We're
thank
here
you.
for it, buddy.
Get out of here,
Justin.
super kick back.
Justin.
Thanks, Justin. Thanks, buddy. Take care.
That was awesome.
Man,
we need
That's
to
our
have.
kind of guy.
Yeah, for sure.
Listen,
We definitely need to have him back. Go ahead.
dude,
We should
like
go
so
bowling
much like we've done some cool shit here the last month, man. Things that have for me have been just like, these are my heroes. Like we've had literal kids on here, and I'm like, these kids are doing some shit that I've wanted to do my whole life. Okay. But as a fan, we just talked to a fan who gets to live out that fandom at a track and be involved in something super special and super cool that Port Royal is doing up there. And if you're watching this and you have not been to Port Royal, go to Port Royal Speedway. Yes. Figure out how to go to Port Royal. I don't care if you're cold. I don't care if it's hot. I don't care if you sit there and watch for an hour and it rains. Go to Port Royal. Get your ass to Port Royal and watch what they're doing.
Can confirm.
Didn't meet Justin officially. I don't even know if he knew he kind of knows my name a little bit, but I walked up in the infield middle of last season at one point on my way out of the track after the race was over. Trailers are leaving. Chris just left too. He's gone. Where's my buddy Chris? Have anybody seen him? But I walked up to Justin. He was standing where you cross over the track, turn 3 and 4, go over the pits. I shook his hand and said, thank you. Just because they've been super welcoming, they want people to be at Port Royal. They're not finding ways for people not to be at Port Royal and encouraged to not be there and just be like, oh, well, we're so-and-so, so you should be thankful to be here. No, they want people at Port Royal in Juniata County. My story is I never went to Port Royal because I had no reason to go to Port Royal as a kid because my Lincoln and Susky, close to the house. But An hour and a half away was like, we weren't doing that. As an adult, I'm hyped to go to Port Royal on a Saturday night if I can get there. Like, if I can make it work, that drive's worth every minute of it. So, Justin and the team, and he got to talk with us tonight, but he talked about Steve a lot, and I'm getting to know a little bit about their story in that group and Steve O'Neill. And really, I mean, it's been what, 2 years, Jimmy, maybe going there a lot. Just that's it.
Yeah.
For me.
Yeah,
I'm a Southern guy, so for me it was like this is a newer thing, and what they're doing is nothing short of special. And I think Steve O'Neill's getting some of that recognition, and Port Royal is. I mean, you look at the facility, walk into that place before any piece of clay has flown, and you walk around and look at that place from, you're like, whoa.
One of my favorite, I know Chris likes doing it too. One of our favorite things to do is when we are camping out there for like a big race, for like a Wykert or the Tusky, you go walk down, usually go to the bathroom, but then go out until you watch the sunrise over the track, empty track from the night, just, it's awesome.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's really cool. You're in awe of it sometimes. It's the reason why I'm a Brog Zierfoss fan is watching him. He won like 6 straight there or whatever that one year. And that, going to that track all the time. That was my first year really going there all the time. And, just a lot of good memories there for me and just the past couple of years, and like he was talking about, helping this current generation and the next generation make memories, and they're definitely doing that up there.
There's a lot of lessons learned, not just in Central PA but all over the country, on how to, if you own a track, you're helping with a track, you're running a track, you're a general manager of a track. There's a lot of lessons learned in Port Royal's story, and it's a lot of hard work, but it's also a lot of the simple things that he talks about the event. And it's funny listening to Justin. You can tell some of the lessons he's learned from Steve and some of the things that he's brought to them. But, just in a business sense, right? Like, I'll just relate, and this is my personal story. I work at an automotive at a car dealership. One of the things the owner of our dealership has said is that we're a business that happens to sell cars. We're not a car dealership. Run the business like a business, and find a reason for people to show up and want your product and value in that, right? I can go pay $20 at one place and $20 at another place and have a totally different experience.
Yep.
Sure.
Right.
Absolutely.
And that's what they're trying to focus on there, and saying, okay, look, I got people to take care of my track and build a racetrack and have something to race on. The rest of it, none of that matters if no one's here to see it.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to figure out how to get people to come see it, and we'll put it all together. Right. And if you have enough people and you have enough talented people, there's an investment made, and they've made that investment. And, I don't know anything about a track. I know nothing, but I know that I enjoy going to Port Royal. When I'm there, I have a good time.
Absolutely.
In any capacity I've ever gone there. So, there's a lot of lessons learned, and man, that was so cool. And we got to have Justin back, and we'll talk with him some more, and appreciate his time. Spent almost 50 minutes 50 minutes of his time. He's a busy guy, and I can tell, I know he has a full-time job. I know he's got Port Royal. He's traveling. So thank you so much for coming on. Hey, subscribe, come back and watch what we got going on, guys. We're going to have more coming. Just tonight have some badass commitments coming up here. Yeah. So not only for next week, but the week after that. And then, so that gets us into late January. So we'll have to see how schedules start working. You're starting to get into All-Star, Florida. Yep. We don't know what's going to happen, but man, if you're not tuned in, if you are tuned in, tell a friend, check out what's coming.
I'll say this, not only tell a friend, tell us who you want to hear from.
Yeah.
We haven't had yet. Give us some suggestions, because what I've learned is they're watching, they're listening.
Yeah.
If you all want to hear them, we'll go try to make it work for you. So
we'll figure it out. I mean, we have some connections a little bit, and we're none of us are racers. We're just fans. But if there's someone you want on here and you're like, man, I would love to hear that story, and you like the way we try to ask questions, create stories, or get from people, let us know who you want to have on here. We'll do our best to try to get them for you guys.
I think it's been a big example of how great this racing community is here. We're not pulling these guys' ears to come onto the show. You know what I mean? And they all just want to come in, and they want to talk about the racing and how it's affected them and all that, and where they're at. And it's been fun learning about everybody. It's been awesome. And if you are a fan of Port Royal and everything that Justin said, keep an eye out on the next couple weeks because there's going to be some familiar names on here, and we're really excited. So just keep an eye out.
And if you're new, check turn2tables.com to check out the last ones. We have like Troy Walgerman, Kyle Keene, Brett Strickland, whatever you need. Turn2tables.com, turn2tables.com for all the social stuff.
Have a great night, guys.
Tonight's second place finisher. Plenty of fans here, Brett, and a solid second place finish.
Yeah, I got to shout out the Turn 2 Terror Boards over there. They're all a bunch of good guys to hang out with, talk to. I really like them.